In a bustling city at a grand technology conference, a young man named Jake stood nervously by the registration table. He adjusted his glasses, glancing around at the crowd. The venue was alive with chatter, and excitement buzzed in the air. Jake had worked tirelessly for months, developing an innovative app he believed could change lives. Today, he had one chance to pitch it to a group of influential investors. But first, he needed to catch a glimpse of Sarah, the gatekeeper, an assistant known for her sharp eye and even sharper tongue. She stood at the entrance, carefully vetting each request for a meeting with the founders. People lined up, pouring out their dreams as Sarah listened with crossed arms, evaluating each one. "Next," she said in a strong, unwavering voice, not even looking up as another hopeful stepped forward. Jake observed how the applicants were met mostly with polite nods or polite rejections. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, heart racing. He could feel the weight of the moment pushing down on him. "Hi, I'm Jake," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I have an app that—" "Sorry, Jake," Sarah interrupted, finally looking him in the eyes, her expression cool and unyielding. "We're booked for the day." His heart sank. She called, cutting him off. Jake took a step back, frustration filling his chest. Did she even know how important this was? He needed this opportunity more than anything. What could he say to change her mind? As he stood there, the words he had rehearsed 1,000 times faded away, replaced by a feeling of hopelessness. And then a commotion caught his eye. The founder of the entire conference, a well-known entrepreneur named David, walked into the room. He was a tall man, exuding charisma and confidence with a presence that commanded attention. You could almost feel the energy shift in the room as people turned to look at him. Jake's heart raced again, but this time not from fear. Behind David, a small crowd of followers hurried, eager to be acknowledged. Jake knew this was his chance. He steeled his mind. Determined, he moved closer, hoping to catch David's eye. As the founder greeted people, Jake shifted between excitement and doubt. Was this a foolish move? He had already been rejected. But then he saw Sarah's dispassionate expression as she stood guard. What if he didn't even need to speak to Sarah? What if he could get David to listen first? With renewed resolve, Jake pushed through the crowd. He had no idea what would happen next, but desperation pushed him onward if he could just make his presence known. The founder turned, his face shifting from a friendly smile to a look of curiosity. Jake approached, excitement and nerves battling within him. This was a risky move. "I'm Jake. I've developed an app that can improve mental health support for people in need." He could see David's eyes light up with interest as he listened. "That sounds intriguing," he replied, his demeanor shifting seamlessly from busy entrepreneur to an approachable figure. But before Jake could continue, Sarah stepped in between them, her eyes narrowing. "With all due respect, David, we don't have time for this." Her words pierced through Jake like a sharp knife. Defeated, he felt his resolve crumble. But David didn't move away. Instead, he looked at Jake closely. Said David, surprising everyone, including Sarah. The room froze. Jake's heart raced again, this time with hope. He turned to Sarah and her expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. Did she truly think he had no value? "Just a few minutes," she repeated, her voice low and tight. "Fine." David stepped aside and Jake knew this was the moment he'd worked for. Taking a deep breath, he launched into his pitch, his voice gaining strength with each word. He spoke of his background, the struggles he saw in people battling mental health issues, and how his app could connect individuals with support systems and communities. As he spoke, he noticed David nodding, the interest clearly growing in his eyes. Jake felt a surge of exhilaration. The crowd around them began to murmur, drawn in by his passion. Even Sarah seemed intrigued now, leaning forward slightly as she listened. "Your app," David said, interrupting only after Jake finished. Jake straightened, sensing an opening. "It uses AI to personalize experiences for users. It's not just generic support, it adapts to the individual's needs, building connections over time." David looked thoughtful, and Jake could see Sarah's steel demeanor crumbling just a bit. "I like that," David finally said. With renewed energy from David's interest, Jake explained the technical aspects of his project, detailing the beta testing phase and user feedback. For the first time, he felt powerful, confident, like he belonged in this space. But he couldn't ignore Sarah, who still looked skeptical. Even with an impressive idea, she interjected, it would need a lot of backing to gain traction. Jake's heart raced once again, this time fighting against the doubt creeping back in. But David only shook his head. "We invest in potential, Sarah." He turned to Jake. "Let's arrange a proper meeting tomorrow." Jake couldn't believe his ears. Excitement flooded him, but he held onto his focus. "Thank you, David." As they shook hands, Jake could feel the warmth of opportunity sparking within him. The tension he had felt earlier melted away. Sarah glanced at David, a mix of irritation and surprise on her face. "Fine," she said tersely, but Jake could sense a shift in her tone. She knew things were changing. More than just the meeting, Jake felt his worth being validated. He had pushed beyond the boundaries set for him. This was more than simply a handshake, it was a door swinging open. As they finished exchanging details, Jake turned to leave, still in a whirlwind of amazement. He glanced back and saw Sarah watching him, a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. Perhaps she had underestimated him. With a mix of triumph and relief, Jake stepped away, ready to conquer the challenges ahead. As he exited the hall, he marveled at how a single turn of events could reshape his path. An idea once dismissed was now set in motion, and thanks to that fateful handshake, he was more than just a dreamer. He was on the brink of making his mark in the world. Little did he know, that single moment was not just pivotal for him, but would also open doors for countless others like him, people searching for hope and connection. And thus began the journey not only to revolutionize an industry, but to create a community. A community built on understanding, support, and the belief that everyone deserves help when they need it the most. All sparked by a brief but powerful moment in a crowded room where rejection turned into opportunity. In a grand hotel ballroom packed with hopeful minds and buzzing ambition, the atmosphere crackled with dreams awaiting their moment. Jake stood in the shadows, gripping his notes. Around him, layers of laughter and conversation blended, creating a symphony of motivation and excitement. Framed by the flickering lights above, the backdrop of this important event seemed almost like a stage set for greatness. You could feel the energy pulse, each person waiting for their moment to shine, like tiny stars hoping to be seen against the vast night sky. But Jake wasn't just another face in the crowd, he felt like a comet ready to blaze through. He had worked tirelessly on his app, a tool targeted at improving mental health support, a lifeline for so many who were suffering in silence. The prospect of pitching to influential investors made his stomach twist, both thrilling and terrifying. But there she was, Sarah. The gatekeeper, she stood tall at the entrance, her gaze piercing, evaluating each hopeful applicant like a hawk surveying its territory. Every time someone approached her, the air turned tense, as if the weight of their dreams rested solely on her approval. Jake watched, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Then he saw them, the founders of the conference, men and women who had built empires from ideas like his. They exuded confidence, each handshake an unspoken promise of potential. But right now, Jake had to get past Sarah first. He took a deep breath. This was the moment he had rehearsed countless times. Keep it simple, he whispered to himself, holding tightly to his pitch as he stepped into the light. As he approached, Sarah didn't even look up from her clipboard. She called flatly, dismissing the applicant before him without a shred of sympathy. "Hi, I'm Jake," he began nervously, his palms sweaty and clammy. "I've developed an app that can really help people with—" "Sorry, Jake," she cut in, finally glancing up yet regardlessly dismissing him with a flick of her pen. His heart plummeted. Did she even know how hard he'd worked, how much this moment meant? She shouted again, her voice sharp as glass. Jake stepped back, heartache mixing with frustration. The weight of rejection bore down on him. Moving away from the registration table, he felt small and invisible. Around him, people hummed on with their pursuits, while he felt like a balloon losing air, spiraling downward. Was this all for nothing? Just then, a ripple of excitement surged through the crowd, as if a gust of wind had swept through the ballroom. Jake turned instinctively and caught sight of him, the founder of the entire conference, David. David was a giant of industry, known for his charisma and sharp business acumen. He entered the room like a sun breaking through clouds, drawing eyes and attention, his presence magnetic. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He had idolized David for years, studied his moves, wanting to mimic that charisma one day. But did he have the courage to approach him now? With a flutter of hope igniting inside him, Jake knew this was possibly his last shot. He resolved to break through the crowd. "I have to try," he thought, pushing aside his self-doubt. As he maneuvered through the tightly packed throng, adrenaline surged through his veins. Each step felt like a leap, the crowd buzzing with anticipation and judgment. He could hear whispers of both admiration and skepticism swirling around him. Was he brave or was he foolish? Finally, he closed the distance between himself and David. His voice felt small yet determined. David turned, his expression shifting from amiable conversation to curiosity. In that instant, Jake could feel the weight of the room shift. All eyes were now on him. The noise faded into a hushed silence. This was his moment, and the world felt suspended. Jake stepped forward, pushing through his nervousness. "I'm Jake." He could see the flicker of interest in David's eyes as he spoke, but even before he could dive deeper into his pitch, Sarah intervened, her face a mix of irritation and authority. "David, we don't have time for this." Jake's stomach dropped again. A aching ring of rejection flashed back, but David's gaze remained fixed on Jake, signaling an openness. "Let's hear him out," he suggested, his tone calm and inviting. Sarah hesitated, her tightly knit arms unfolding, resisting the urge to narrow her eyes at Jake. "This is not a good use of time," she protested, but David shook his head slightly, a subtle gesture that echoed with command and determination. "I want to know more." Jake felt the tension shift again, anticipation hung thick in the air. Did he really have a chance? His voice steadied, filled with newfound confidence. "Thank you. My app aims to connect individuals with the support they need, personalizing experiences that make a real difference." As he spoke about the innovation and its potential impact, he noticed David leaning in, intrigued. The courtroom surrounding them melted into a backdrop, and for a moment, it felt as if they were the only two people in that expansive room. Jake poured his heart into every sentence, painting a picture of hope and connection. He was no longer merely pitching an idea, he was sharing a lifeline. Impressive, David finally remarked. What makes it unique? Jake explained everything he had polished to perfection over the months, the breakthroughs, the beta tests, the feedback from users eager for change. As he spoke, he experienced a wave of relief as David continued nodding. The glint of genuine interest now lit up his eyes. And then Sarah stepped in again. Even with a great idea, it takes resources to get traction. Her words were like a sudden gust of cold air, bringing with it the feeling of doubt. Yet David countered, "But that's what innovation is about. We invest in potential, Sarah." Jake's heart swelled with determination, feeling the validation he had longed for. This was not merely a chance to pitch his creation, it was a moment that could change everything, not just for him, but for others who needed this app. David turned back to Jake. "Let's arrange a follow-up meeting. I want to dive deeper into this." The world lifted off his shoulders, a flood of warmth coursing through him. Jake felt powerful, almost invincible. They shook hands, the contact feeling electric, a tangible acknowledgement of everything he had fought for. As he turned to leave, the triumph surged through him, but he couldn't ignore the surprised gaze Sarah shot at him. A flicker of respect glimmered, perhaps a recognition she hadn't seen before. This wasn't just a victory for Jake, it was a symbol of the unforeseen paths we carve when we dare to dream and act. As he stepped back into the buzzing room, he felt like he was walking on air. The moment had been transformative, a turning point that ignited something profound within him, a resolve to not just talk about change, but to be a catalyst for it. Jake absorbed everything, the laughter, the ambitions, the dreams breathing life in that room. It hit him then, he wasn't just an applicant, he was a disruptor, and from that moment on he vowed to embody that truth. Returning to the hotel the next day, the growing support behind his app felt almost tangible. He couldn't help but remember that first rejection and how it had fueled his desire to push harder. Days turned to weeks, and in what felt like an instant, his app began to gain traction. Each encounter he had after that pivotal handshake reflected his unstoppable journey: meetings, feedback, investors passionate about sharing resources. With every little step, Jake recognized the deeper meaning of his experience. Perhaps what mattered most wasn't just about securing a meeting or a sale. It was about fighting through adversity, believing in the power of audacity, tapping into the courage to stand up and voice his truth. He often recalled how his journey unfolded that day at the conference, a testament to the notion that rejection is merely a stepping stone to something greater. And it was that moment when David stepped out from the crowd, shaking his hand, that had opened the door to a future once clouded in uncertainty, redefining not just his path, but countless lives along with it. With every new user that reached out for support, every story of hope that emerged, Jake felt a connection deeper than any pitch could encapsulate. He wasn't just making waves, he was creating a tide of change, a movement that echoed beyond his expectations. It all started with that single, bold step into the light, and that astonishing handshake, a reminder that every great journey begins with the courage to be heard. In a packed conference hall buzzing with energy, the air was electric with hope and ambition. Entrepreneurs milled about, their eyes gleaming with dreams and aspirations. In the center of this whirlwind stood a young man named Jake, his hands trembling slightly as he clutched a stack of notes. He had only one goal today, to present his groundbreaking app that he believed could revolutionize mental health support. But as he scanned the room, his heart sank. Investors and founders were surrounded by eager applicants, each one waiting for a chance to share their vision. Among them loomed Sarah, the head assistant to the conference founder, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp tongue. Her presence was daunting, each word that slipped through her lips felt like a decree. "Next," she called, her voice booming like a gavel, dismissing the last hopeful with an indifference that made the young man's shoulders droop. As he exited, Jake caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the glass doors. He looked every bit the part of a dreamer, nervous, hopeful, but also invisible. Jake took a deep breath. This was his moment. He had to push past the fear. He stepped forward and cleared his throat, summoning every ounce of courage within him. "Hi, I'm Jake," he began, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Before he could continue, Sarah's gaze flicked up, her expression one of skepticism that immediately sent a chill through his spine. "Sorry, we're not accepting new pitches today," she replied, barely concealing her annoyance as she returned her focus to her clipboard. "Wait, please," Jake appealed, desperation creeping into his tone. She barked, cutting him off. Frustration welled up inside him. Did she have any idea how much effort he'd poured into this project, or the lives that could be changed if only he could get the chance to share it? In that moment of despair, a commotion broke out at the back of the room. All heads turned towards the entrance, and Jake's heart leaped into his throat when he saw him, the founder of the conference, David. Tall and charismatic, he walked in like a lion entering its den, exuding an aura of success and authority that made everyone momentarily forget their own aspirations. Jake's mind raced. This was the kind of man who could change everything. If only he could catch David's attention, he thought. He took a step forward, conscious of the eyes that bored into his back. He could feel the weight of their judgment, but determination kept his legs moving. He called, trying to sustain his voice above the murmur of the audience. "The The founder turned, curiosity lighting up his eyes. For a fraction of a second, everything else faded into the background. Daring to seize this opportunity, Jake pushed through the crowd. "I'm Jake, and I've developed an app that," and before he could really dive into his pitch, Sarah interjected fiercely, stepping between them like a wall. "David, we don't have time for this. He's not on the schedule," she declared, an edge to her tone that caught Jake off guard. Jake felt his heart drop, a mixture of hope and crushing disappointment flooding through him. Would this chance slip away before he even had a shot? But David didn't budge. "Let's hear him out," he said, a surprising warmth in his voice that cut through the tension. Jake's heart raced again. Was this really happening? In an instant, Sarah's eyes widened, disbelief coloring her features. She glanced back at David as if searching for confirmation. "Just a few minutes," David added, his tone amicable yet firm. Jake felt a surge of adrenaline course through him. This was it. Gathering the last bit of courage he could muster, he turned to David, who was now looking at him expectantly. Jake exclaimed, his voice filled with urgency. "My app connects individuals struggling with mental health to supportive communities, helping them find the resources they need." As he spoke, the nervousness that had gripped him began to dissipate. With every word, the room seemed to draw closer, his passion reverberating off the walls. David's face lit up with interest, his attention unwavering. "Interesting," David mused, cutting off Jake's racing thoughts. Jake launched into details about his innovative approach, the unique algorithms that allowed for tailored support, the feedback he had gathered from early test users. He could see David nodding, the flicker of enthusiasm in his eyes igniting a fire within Jake, but Sarah wasn't ready to give up just yet. Jake fought through the tension knotting in his stomach. Just when he thought he might crumble, David responded, his voice calm and assured. "Sarah, this is exactly what we're here for. We invest in potential." Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Here was a man who believed in possibility, who could see beyond the barriers others imposed. They fell into a rhythm. The conversation evolved, teetering between ideas and ambitions, casting a wide net over what could be accomplished. Finally, David held out his hand, a gesture filled with promise. "Let's set up a formal meeting." That simple handshake transformed everything. As Jake grasped David's hand, he felt an invincible surge of energy. It was a symbolic moment that solidified his journey from hopeful dreamer to someone taking tangible steps toward change. The weight of self-doubt that had pinned him down like a stone lifted as they parted. He glanced back at Sarah, whose expression had shifted from one of dismissal to surprise, perhaps even curiosity. A flicker of respect danced in her eyes, making Jake realize that even in the face of rejection, he had carved a path forward. The next few days felt surreal. Jake found himself walking taller, filled with a confidence he had previously lacked. He honed his pitch, refined ideas, and transformed his app further, all while feeling a renewed purpose. He quickly secured meetings with advisors and gathered feedback from users. With David's influence, doors that had once closed tightly began to creak open. It was as if the universe had aligned to propel him forward. With every stride he took, Jake realized the lessons woven throughout his journey. Fear often disguises itself as the walls we perceive around us, limiting our reach and diminishing our roles. Yet by confronting those fears, by stepping forward into the unknown, he had not only fought for himself, but had also sparked hope for so many others waiting in the wings. Weeks turned into months, and the app took shape more beautifully than he ever imagined. A community blossomed around it, a space where users could share stories, offer support, and connect with each other. And then came the launch day, a day filled with anxiety and exhilaration. As he stood on stage, facing a sea of faces that mirrored his own past hopes and struggles, he felt a wave of solidarity wash over him. This wasn't just his success, it was a collective triumph. Jake spoke passionately, weaving a narrative of resilience and community support, each word becoming a thread binding his dreams with those of countless others. The applause that erupted felt like thunder, an affirmation of his journey and the lives it would touch. Afterward, as he basked in the celebration, his thoughts drifted to that pivotal moment at the conference, how a single request denied had turned into an opportunity he had never imagined. He realized that resilience is a journey forged not just through personal victories, but in the meaningful connections built along the way. And as the crowd began to disperse, he spotted David across the hall, mingling with attendees. Their eyes met, and David approached with a smile. "Incredible work, Jake." Jake grinned back, genuinely grateful. David nodded thoughtfully. As they shook hands again, Jake understood the depth of what that moment really meant. The journey had been arduous, but it had ignited a fire that would continue burning brightly in him and in so many others he had touched. In that vibrant ballroom of dreams, Jake stood not just as a founder, but as a beacon of resilience. He had learned that true success isn't merely about the accolades, it's about embracing the challenges, about believing in your vision even when others don't, and about finding power in the unexpected connections forged along the way. And just like that, amid the echoes of celebration, Jake felt the threads of his story weaving into something far greater than himself, a movement, a legacy. A testament to the courage it takes to step forward, even when the world tries to hold you back. In a room full of ambition and dreams colliding, Jake felt like a ghost. He stood in the corner of a bustling conference hall, watching as hopeful entrepreneurs pitched their ideas to investors. The energy buzzed like static electricity, each connection igniting a new potential. Yet here he was waiting for his turn, battling a storm of self-doubt. Jake had created something special, a mental health app he poured his heart into for nearly a year. It wasn't just a product, it was a lifeline for people struggling in silence, a way to break the stigma surrounding mental health. But as he observed the confident pitches and animated discussions, he felt small. Right in the center of it all was Sarah. She was the gatekeeper, the assistant to the influential founder of the conference. She sat with an air of authority, her clipboard in hand, listening to pitches with a scrutinizing gaze. Jake had heard mixed things about her. Some considered her tough but fair, while others said she could be cold and dismissive, offering no second chances. The line of hopeful entrepreneurs continued to grow, and with each passing minute, Jake's anxieties mounted. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, repeating the mantra like a lifeline. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the moment he would step forward. He had rehearsed his pitch countless times, but the reality was far more intimidating than any practice session. Finally, it was his turn. As he approached Sarah, the weight of his dreams pressed hard against his chest. "Hi, I'm Jake," he introduced himself, his voice slightly trembling. The wave of dread crashed over him. Just like that, he felt invisible, a flicker of hope extinguished in an instant. "But I really believe this could help people," he pressed, desperation creeping into his tone. "Next," she said curtly, her patience clearly wearing thin. Dejected, Jake took a step back, feeling beaten down by circumstances out of his control. As he turned away, he was filled with a mixture of frustration and despair. Did she even understand what he was trying to achieve? The rejection twisted inside him like a knife. But just as he thought about slipping away, a low murmur swept through the crowd. Jake turned to see someone entering the hall, a man who commanded attention just by walking in, David, the founder of the conference. He was known for his success and vision, a man who had turned ideas into gold. Jake felt his stomach tight. Could David change his fate today? Fueled by a sudden surge of adrenaline, he made his way through the crowd, threading past entrepreneurs and investors alike, desperate to reach this one man. Jake called, his voice trembling but resolute. The founder turned, curiosity dancing in his eyes like a spark igniting a flame. Jake had never felt this kind of tension before. The weight of the entire room seemed to rest firmly on his shoulders. "I'm Jake. I've developed an app that..." Before he could finish, Sarah stepped in front of him, shielding David as though protecting a treasure. "David, we don't have time for this," she said, her tone fierce. "He's not on the schedule." Jake's heart sank again. It felt like all hope was slipping from his grasp once more. But David, unfazed by Sarah's interruption, regarded Jake thoughtfully. "Let's hear him out," David said, a warmth in his voice that felt refreshing amidst the chill. Jake stood frozen, disbelief washing over him. Could he really have this moment? Sarah's eyes widened, and for a brief instant, her resolve faltered. "Just a few minutes," she conceded, although the annoyance was clear in her tone. Jake could hardly breathe as he gathered his thoughts, realizing he had only moments to seize this opportunity. "Thank you, David," he began, trying to invest all his hopes and fears into those few sentences. "My app connects people who are struggling with mental health issues to communities and resources that can really help them." As he spoke, he watched for any sign of interest from David. The flicker of understanding in his eyes breathed life into Jake's faltering confidence. The words began to flow more freely now, fueled by passion and urgency. David leaned in, listening intently. He asked, his tone shifting from polite curiosity to genuine intrigue. Jake felt emboldened. "It uses AI to tailor recommendations based on user behavior, creating a supportive ecosystem that adapts to individual needs." As he spoke, Jake noticed David straightening up, his expression growing more animated. For a moment, the noise of the room faded, leaving just the two of them engaged in this pivotal conversation. Still, Sarah interjected, her skepticism rolling in like a storm cloud. "Even with a unique idea, it takes resources and a validated prototype to move forward, Jake." Jake felt the pressure tightening around him, but David countered promptly, his voice firm but encouraging. "That's exactly what we're here for, Sarah." Jake could barely contain his excitement as this unfolding drama shifted the atmosphere around him. Here was a door opening just a crack, and he had to burst through it. "Let's arrange a formal meeting," David said, offering Jake his hand. Time seemed to freeze as Jake grasped David's hand. The firm grip felt like a lifeline. He could hardly process the fact that this single handshake might change everything. Simple exchange, an avalanche of possibilities surged within him. As they separated, Jake caught sight of Sarah's expression, no longer dismissive but filled with surprise. Maybe she understood in that moment the potential she had almost overlooked. Heart pounding, Jake stepped back into the crowd, filled with a sense of victory. This wasn't just about the meeting or the pitch, it was validation of everything he had fought for. Just moments ago, Sarah had rejected him, but now the tides had turned. The energy around him shifted, illuminating the path ahead. Over the next few days, Jake immersed himself in perfecting his app. pouring everything he had into refining the technology and solidifying the plan. He reached out to potential users, collecting invaluable feedback that would help shape his project even further. With David's interest and support, doors he thought were closed began to swing open wide, revealing a landscape of possibilities. Every conversation, every connection he made felt charged with purpose. With each step, he began to see the impact his app could have in the real world, a platform dedicated to transforming lives. He often found himself reflecting on that initial rejection, realizing it had ignited a fire within him that otherwise might have remained dormant. A month later, Jake stood outside the office building where he would present his final proposal. The night before, he had barely slept, filled with excitement but also anxiety. This was the moment that could set the course for everything he dreamed of. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The warm glow of the office welcomed him, and the air was rich with the scent of fresh coffee and possibility. As he entered the conference room, he was greeted by David and a few other key investors' faces filled with interest and curiosity. Jake presented with confidence, weaving stories of users who might benefit from this app, their struggles and triumphs combining into a powerful narrative that resonated deeply. He felt strong, grounded, and more at ease than he had ever imagined he could in such a setting. As he wrapped up, the room hummed with a mix of excitement and contemplation. David leaned back, visibly impressed. "I can see the passion and the potential here." A rush of exhilaration swept over Jake at the realization that he was not just pitching an idea, but was being embraced as a partner in the hope he wished to spread. The investors asked thoughtful questions, and every answer felt like a building block solidifying their belief in what this could become. Finally, David stood and extended his hand again. With that handshake, an entire world of opportunity opened. Jake felt as if he were standing not just on his feet, but upon the shoulders of those who believed in him, a connection cascading from experiences shared with strangers, transforming them into allies and supporters. Weeks turned into months, and the app was officially launched. The response was overwhelming, but it was the stories that poured in afterward that truly touched him, users thanking him, finding solace, and forming connections with others who understood their struggles. Jake often thought back to that day at the conference of Sarah's rejection and the leap he took when approaching David. It wasn't just a pivotal moment, it was a testament to resilience, a reminder that sometimes the world tries to block your path, but with enough courage and conviction, you can knock down those walls. And as he stood at a community event, surrounded by the very people his app had helped, Jake realized that the journey was far more significant than he had ever anticipated. He had turned rejection into an opportunity, forging a path not just for himself, but for countless others seeking connection, support, and hope. In the end, it was more than just a handshake, it was a beginning, a movement rooted in authenticity, a reminder that even when the world tells you no, sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in the power of your dream to send ripples of change throughout the lives of many. In the chaotic bustle of a startup conference, the kind where dreams collide and ideas spark like firecrackers, Jake stood nervously at the edge of the crowd. The energy in the air was palpable, charged with ambition and hope. Everywhere he looked, passionate entrepreneurs pitched their visions, weaving compelling narratives that gripped the attention of investors. Each handshake and nod exchanged felt like a step closer to success. Jake wasn't just another face in the crowd, he was a man on a mission. For the past year, he had poured every ounce of his soul into developing a mental health app aimed at providing support to individuals in need. It was a project born from personal experience, a lifeline to connect people who felt lost in their struggles with depression and anxiety. Today was his chance to share it with the world, but first he needed to get past Sarah. Sarah was the gatekeeper, an assistant to the founder of the conference, and a figure of mixed reputation. Some whispered about her as the Ice Queen, someone who could shoot down dreams with a flick of her pen, while others admired her sharp instincts and the way she safeguarded the event's integrity. It was said that getting on her good side was the first step to success. As Jake watched her interact with other hopeful entrepreneurs, a knot twisted in his stomach. Would she recognize the potential in his vision, or would she dismiss him outright? Fueled by both fear and determination, he tightened his grip on his pitch notes. "You've practiced this," he told himself. After what felt like an eternity, he steeled himself and approached the registration table where she sat with her clipboard. The moment he opened his mouth, it felt as though the entire room faded into silence. "Hi, I'm Jake," he began, his voice steady yet laced with the tremor of anticipation. "I've developed an app that can help improve mental health support by connecting users with tailored resources," and before he could say another word, Sarah cut him off. "Sorry, we're not accepting any more pitches today," she said, her tone devoid of warmth. His heart sank. Her finality was chilling, leaving no room for negotiation or hope. Dejected, Jake felt the walls closing in on him. He had rehearsed his pitch 1,000 times, but here he stood, rejected like so many before him. As he turned away, he felt small, like a forgotten piece of paper lost in a hectic world. Just then, a ripple of excitement surged through the crowd. People turned to the entrance, their expressions lighting up with recognition. Jake's heart raced as he saw him, David, the founder of the conference. Known for his transformative ideas and uncanny ability to spot potential, David entered the room like a meteor blazing through the night sky. Jake's pulse quickened. This was it, the man who could change everything. Without thinking, he pushed his way through the throng of attendees, each step dragging him closer to both hope and fear. If I can just get his attention, he thought, feeling himself shake with uncertainty. Jake called out louder than he'd intended as he reached the edge of a gathering crowd. David turned, curiosity flashing across his face. In that brief moment, time slowed and Jake felt the weight of the entire room upon him. "I'm Jake. I've created an app that can help support mental health." Before he could finish, Sarah stepped in, her eyes narrowing as she blocked Jake from David's view. "David, we don't have time for this," she said, crossing her arms firmly across her chest. Jake's heart plummeted again. This had to be a cruel twist of fate. Would he really not get a chance at all? But David didn't back down. "Let's hear him out," he said, his voice calm yet commanding. Jake felt a flicker of hope. Could it be? Could things change right here, right now? Sarah hesitated, her expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance. Part of her seemed ready to argue, but David's gaze settled on Jake, inviting him to share. "Just a few minutes," Sarah finally relented, although the irritation lingered in her tone. Jake seized the opportunity, spirits rising. He exclaimed, his heart racing. "My app connects individuals with mental health challenges to community resources tailored to their needs." As he spoke, he leaned into his passion, letting each word slip from his lips like a well-rehearsed melody. This was why he had come, this was what he believed in. David's eyes brightened and the tension in the room shifted. With each sentence, Jake felt a weight lift, as if he were shedding layers of doubt with every word. David inquired, clearly intrigued. Jake didn't hesitate. "It utilizes AI to analyze user behavior and adapt to their specific situations." Through the rhythm of his pitch, he noticed David leaning forward. He was listening, engaged. The room fell silent, hoping to catch the next wave of Jake's narrative. But Sarah's skepticism soon crept back in like dark clouds threatening their sunny day. Even with a concept as interesting as that, it requires validation and resources. "You don't have the groundwork laid out yet," she said, pressing on. Jake felt as if the world was closing in again, but David countered her assertions, his voice firm yet supportive. "We invest in potential, Sarah." The weight of those words filled Jake with confidence. He could see David's belief in his idea shimmering like a beacon in the fog of doubt. They were on the cusp of something larger than just a simple pitch. "Let's arrange a formal meeting," David said, extending his hand toward Jake. In that simple moment, everything changed for Jake. As their hands met in a firm handshake, it felt like lightning coursing through him, a blend of excitement and validation. Here was his chance, and it wasn't just about him. It was about every person who needed the lifeline his app would provide. Jake turned to call back to Sarah, who looked shocked, her calculated demeanor unraveling in real time. Had he just stepped through the door she had slammed shut? With energy surging through his veins, Jake stepped away from the registration table, high on hope. He could hardly believe it. He had gone from facing rejection to forging a connection that could transform lives. This wasn't just an achievement for him, it was a potential wave of change for others who struggled alone. The next weeks unfolded like a dream. Jake worked day and night, fine-tuning his app and gathering feedback from beta users. The early responses were promising. Stories poured in about how people found solace through the app, connecting with others who understood. It validated everything he believed in, a shared community built on empathy. His meetings with David revealed twists and turns of mentorship that pushed Jake to expand his vision further. They discussed options, strategies, and the road ahead, building a partnership that felt both electrifying and grounding. As they collaborated, Jake learned that resilience wasn't just about pushing through rejection, but about embracing every challenge as a stepping stone. David had encountered his fair share of failures before achieving success, reminding Jake that the journey was as important as the destination. Then came the day of the official launch. Jake stood in front of a crowd at the conference where it all began. This time the air shimmered with excitement, and he felt a whirlwind of gratitude for every twist in his journey. On stage, he spoke with vigor, not just about the app itself, but about the sense of community and hope it fostered. "This isn't just an app, it's a movement," he declared passionately. When he concluded, the applause that erupted felt like a tidal wave of support washing over him and grounding him in reality. This was real. He had turned his vision into something tangible, and others were ready to embrace it. After the event, as people flocked around him, sharing their thoughts, he spotted Sarah on the far side of the room. She watched him, her expression inscrutable. Jake approached, not with anger but curiosity. "Thank you for providing me the chance to pitch," he said earnestly. Her facade cracked slightly, revealing a hint of respect. "You've done well, Jake. I was wrong to dismiss you so quickly." As they exchanged nods, Jake felt a sense of closure. The rejection had shaped him, fueled him. In a way, he could thank Sarah for sparking the fire that led him to this moment. Months turned into a vibrant tapestry of success stories. The app flourished, allowing users to connect and support one another, breaking barriers he had once deemed insurmountable. The purpose of the app extended beyond mental health. It had become a sanctuary for connection in a world that sometimes felt overwhelmingly isolating. Jake often reflected on that day in the conference hall, the profound lesson engraved into his spirit. It echoed a truth that can easily be buried under layers of fear and doubt. Sometimes the world will deny you, but sometimes all it takes is one moment, one handshake, one person to believe in your potential to create an avalanche of change. As he stood, looking out over a crowd of people filled with gratitude and hope, Jake knew deep down that he was exactly where he was meant to be, embraced by community and surrounded by the strength that comes from connection. All because he had the courage to step forward, even when rejection loomed like a shadow. He made a vow in that moment to continue pushing boundaries, to elevate voices that often go unheard, and to remind others that sometimes the greatest triumphs begin with an audacious leap of faith. Through his journey, he didn't just build an app, he helped build a movement that united and transformed lives. And in that unity, Jake had not just found his purpose, he found a path to something even greater than himself. In a crowded convention center, the hum of chatter and excitement filled the air as hundreds of hopeful entrepreneurs prepared to pitch their dreams. Among them stood Jake, a young man with a heart full of ambition and a mind spinning with ideas. His creation was more than just an app. It was a lifeline for those grappling with mental health challenges, a way to connect, to reach out, and to find support in a world that often felt isolating. As the minutes ticked by, Jake felt the weight of his dreams pressing down on him. He took a deep breath and stepped back, observing the scene before him. Each applicant seemed more confident, more prepared than he felt. The anxiety bubbled up inside him. What if he messed this up? What if he was just wasting his time? Everywhere he looked, entrepreneurs exchanged energetic handshakes. Investors leaned in, their interest peaked, their eyes sparkling with the promise of new ideas. But there, standing firmly at the entrance, was Sarah, the gatekeeper, the assistant to the conference founder. Some had hailed her as practical and sharp, while others whispered doubts of her coldness, that frozen demeanor that could extinguish a flame of hope in an instant. Jake's heart raced as he caught sight of her. It was easy to dismiss an idea with a simple shake of the head, and he knew how many dreams had been crushed beneath her steely gaze. He felt a tight knot of anxiety twisting in his stomach as he prepared to step forward. The opportunity loomed like a bright beacon, yet the fear of rejection felt like an anchor dragging him down. "Just be yourself," he whispered to himself, repeating the mantra like a lifeline. Finally, the moment came. Jake approached the registration table where Sarah sat with her pen poised, ready to mark another name on her clipboard. With a racing heartbeat, he introduced himself. "Hi, I'm Jake." Before he could finish his pitch, Sarah cut him off sharply, her eyes barely lifting from her clipboard. The words hit him like a cold splash of water. Desperation gnawed at him. "But I really believe this can make a difference." His voice trailed off as she raised her hand, cutting him off again. She barked, her tone leaving no room for argument. The air felt heavy as Jake stepped away, his heart sinking. All those late nights, all the sweat and tears he had poured into this project, and it felt like they had been dismissed without a second thought. A wave of frustration washed over him, mixed with a sense of urgency. Did she have any idea how much this mattered? But before he could lose himself in despair, a commotion erupted near the front of the hall. Heads turned, and the atmosphere shifted almost instantly. Jake felt his heart race once again as he saw him, David, the founder of the conference, the man who had built an empire from ideas just like his. David entered the room with an aura of charisma, collecting attention effortlessly. He was tall, confident, and had a magnetic presence that made the entire room feel alive. Jake's pulse quickened. This was the man who could change everything, the one who could open doors. He had to get his attention. Without giving it a second thought, Jake moved through the crowd, determination propelling him forward. If I can just reach him, he thought. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown. Would this be worth it? Could he channel the nervous energy bubbling inside him? Jake called out as the founder conversed with a small group of admirers. The noise of the room seemed to fade away as David turned to face him. There was a moment of silence, a pause that stretched like an eternity. David replied, curiosity evident in his tone. In that heartbeat, it was as if the entire world had narrowed down to just the two of them. Jake felt the intensity of the moment surge through him, his dreams ready to spill out. "I'm Jake." Before he could continue, Sarah stepped forward, her demeanor shifting to stone-cold protectiveness. "David, we don't have time for this. He's not on the schedule," she interjected, her voice sharp and unwavering. Jake's heart sank. The opportunity was slipping through his fingers again. Panic coursed through him. But then, to his surprise, David didn't back down. Instead, he paused, considering the exchange. "Let's hear him out," David insisted, a surprising warmth in his voice that filled Jake with hope. Sarah hesitated, her eyes narrowing, but David's gaze remained steady and inviting. "Just a few minutes," he added, his tone firm yet encouraging. Jake seized this moment like a lifeline. "Thank you, David. "I really appreciate it," he said, his voice steadying. "My app connects users with mental health support tailored to their needs." As he launched into his pitch, the nervousness that had gripped him began to dissipate. He could see David's interest growing, the flicker of engagement lighting up his face. Jake poured every ounce of passion and purpose into those words, painting a picture of connection and hope. David inquired, his brow furrowed in thoughtful consideration. "It uses AI to tailor experiences based on user interactions," Jake explained. David leaned in, the excitement palpable as the conversation unfolded, but Sarah wasn't finished yet. She stepped in again, her skepticism returning. "Even with an interesting concept, there's no prototype. This requires substantial backing." Jake felt the panic rise, but the strength in David's gaze held him steady. "And that's where potential comes in, Sarah." Jake could hardly breathe as his heart raced. This was not merely the approval he sought, but a glimpse into the future. He felt the ground beneath him shifting, an avalanche of possibility unfolding. "Let's set up a formal meeting," David proposed, extending his hand toward Jake, the warmth radiating from his palm. Jake felt the room fall silent around them. As their hands clasped, it felt like sealing a promise suspended in time. In that moment, the weight of doubt dissolved, replaced by a surge of purpose. Here was a man who believed in transformation, who saw potential where others might only see obstacles. As Jake stepped away, he caught a glimpse of Sarah's expression. It had morphed from dismissal to astonishment. Perhaps in that moment she reconsidered her own preconceptions. Uncertainty flickered across her features. Had she misjudged the potential he represented? Jake moved through the crowd, exhilaration coursing through him as he absorbed the unfolding moment. He had faced rejection, but had turned it into an opportunity. His mind buzzed with the possibilities ahead, the chance to truly create change in the world for those who needed it most. In the ensuing weeks, Jake worked tirelessly, refining his app based on feedback and engaging with potential users. The excitement around his project grew, and new connections blossomed like flowers breaking through the thaw of winter's grip. Jake and David met frequently, brainstorming ways to make the app not just functional but revolutionary. David shared stories of his own setbacks, illuminating the lessons learned along the way. The journey was filled with ups and downs, each misstep paving the way to innovation. Just 3 months later, the launch day finally arrived. Jake entered the conference hall, now brimming with energy and purpose. The very place where he had felt the weight of rejection transformed into an arena of possibility. As he stood before the crowd, a mix of excitement and apprehension washed over him. This wasn't just his moment, it was about every single person who had shared their story with him, each one a reminder of why he had fought through the challenges. With the microphone in hand, Jake projected his voice, weaving through the narrative of hope and connection. "This app is not just about technology, it's a movement," he declared, passion igniting his words. He recounted stories of people who had found solace through connections made in the community that many lives touched, even in just the beta stages. As he spoke, the faces in the audience shifted from curiosity to engagement. He could see acceptance, recognition, and a shared understanding that forged connections in the silence of each personal struggle. When he finished, the applause that erupted felt like a wave crashing over him, enveloping him in a torrent of support. It was a moment of triumph, the culmination of hard work, belief, and resilience. Afterward, as he mingled with the crowd of supporters and champions, he spotted Sarah lingering at the edge of the room. This time he approached her without hesitation. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he said earnestly, his heart brimming with gratitude. Her expression softened, the tension in her shoulders loosening. "You've done incredibly well, Jake. I was wrong to dismiss you." A sense of closure settled in as he realized that her skepticism had indeed shaped the path he had taken. The rejection had sparked the fire that had ultimately transformed his journey. Months flew by, and Jake's app became a beacon of hope for countless users. The stories he received daily filled him with purpose, a stark reminder of why he had ventured down this path in the first place. Jake often reflected on that pivotal moment in the conference hall, recognizing it as a lesson in perseverance. Sometimes the greatest setbacks lead to the most remarkable successes. As he stood in front of a group of eager young innovators at another conference, sharing his story, he felt empowered. "Each rejection is merely a stepping stone toward the possibility of something greater," he declared, the truth washing over the audience. Through his journey, Jake discovered that true success wasn't just about the accolades, it was the connections and community forged along the way. In that realization, he found not only purpose, but also peace, a deep understanding that kindness, empathy, and collaboration could spark transformation in ways he had never imagined. And so, with each day that passed, Jake knew he was fulfilling a mission that extended beyond himself. He had not just built an app, he had ignited a movement, a testament to resilience and the extraordinary power of connection. In a world where dreams often collide with rejection, Jake had stepped forward, embodied courage, and turned a spark of possibility into a roaring flame of change. And that journey, that unfolding narrative of hope, would continue to ripple through lives, one connection at a time. In the heart of a buzzing tech conference, amidst the vibrant chatter and the scent of fresh coffee, a young man named Jake stood frozen in place, staring at the throng of hopeful innovators ready to pitch their dreams. The air was thick with excitement. Entrepreneurs filled the hall, each vying for the attention of investors and industry leaders. But Jake felt dwarfed by it all, his spirit teetering on the edge of doubt. He had spent countless hours developing his app, a groundbreaking tool designed to support mental health, helping users connect with resources and communities tailored to their personal struggles. But right now, that dream felt like a distant mirage. What if his ideas fell flat? What if he was unremarkable among such fierce competition? He took a deep breath, glancing at the registration table where Sarah sat, a formidable assistant known as the gatekeeper of the conference. She held a clipboard, eyes sharp as she scrutinized each applicant with an air of resolute authority. Jake had heard whispers about her. She was legendary for her brutal honesty and no-nonsense approach. Many had told tales of dreams dashed as she turned them away with little more than a few words. As he watched her, perspiration formed at his temples. Would she see the fire inside him, or merely a naive dreamer? With every passing moment, his resolve began to fracture. But then something within stirred. "You only get one shot," he muttered under his breath, courage flickering to life. Finally, he stepped forward, heart pounding like a drum. "Hi, I'm Jake," he said, forcing a smile, his voice slightly trembling. Sarah glanced up, her expression unreadable. "Sorry, we're not accepting any more pitches today," she replied, the words flat and dismissive. A wave of despair crashed over him. "But I believe this could help so many people," he pleaded, his voice filling with urgency. She exclaimed, turning her attention back to the line behind him with a practiced aloofness. Jake stepped back, feeling the heat of rejection wash over him. Every inch of hope he had clung to slipped away. He moved aside, the air feeling heavy around him like a storm cloud. All his efforts, his sleepless nights, seemed to vanish in that moment. Just then, a sudden shift rippled through the crowd. The energy shifted like a gust of wind, and Jake turned to see a figure entering the room. It was David, the founder of the conference, a man revered for his visionary ideas and transformational approach to innovation. With every confident step he took, heads turned and whispers ignited. Jake felt his heart leap. This was the person who could be a catalyst for change, the one who could breathe life into his vision. But how could he get David's attention? He took a breath, feeling a flicker of resolve igniting once again. Determined, he maneuvered through the crowd, his heart racing with anticipation. He had heard stories of David's ability to recognize potential, to see beyond the surface. This could be my chance, Jake thought, urgency propelling him forward. He called out, raising his voice to penetrate the clamor around him. The noise seemed to dissipate as he caught David's eye. David turned, curiosity dancing across his features. Jake approached, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm Jake." With every word, he felt a spark of hope ignite within him, fueled by a blend of excitement and nervousness. But before he could detail his vision, Sarah stepped forward, her presence like a wall. "David, we don't have time for this," she said, exuding authority. Jake's heart plunged at her words. Did he even have a chance? The opportunity felt like it was slipping through his fingers like sand in an hourglass, but David held his ground. "Let's hear him out," he said, a warmth in his voice that struck a chord deep within Jake. Sarah hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face. "Just a few minutes," she finally conceded, although the annoyance lingered in her tone. Jake seized the moment, adrenaline surging within him. He exclaimed, relief washing over him. "My app is designed to personalize mental health support and connect users to resources tailored to their individual needs." As he spoke, the tension in the room shifted. Jake poured every ounce of passion he had into that share. He was no longer just a nervous young man. He was a messenger, carrying the hope of so many. David's eyes sparkled with interest as Jake continued, his confidence steadily rising. David asked, leaning in intrigued. "It uses cutting-edge technology to analyze user behavior and tailor recommendations, creating meaningful connections," Jake responded, his voice growing stronger with each word. David nodded, clearly captivated, but Sarah interjected with skepticism, crossing her arms, her tone steely. "Even with all that, without a prototype, this is just a concept." Jake felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the sharp sting of objection. But before he could falter, David countered, his voice firm yet encouraging. "That's what we're here for, Sarah." For a brief moment, everything and everyone else faded away. The air felt charged, electric with possibility. Jake realized he wasn't just trying to convince David, he was fighting for every single person who needed this app. "Let's arrange a meeting," David said, extending his hand toward Jake. In that heartbeat, everything changed for Jake. As they shook hands, it felt like the weight of the world lifted. The moment sealed a promise, igniting hope that surged through him like fire, washing away despair. Jake turned to catch Sarah's eye, and for the first time her expression shifted. The hint of respect lingered there, maybe an acknowledgement that she had been wrong to dismiss him. With renewed energy, Jake stepped back into the crowd, a sense of exhilaration flooding his veins. He had gone from potential rejection to chance at collaboration with someone who believed in his vision. The thrill was electric, leaving him breathless as he moved away from Sarah and the registration table. In the following weeks, Jake worked tirelessly on his app, refining its features and engaging with early users. The feedback poured in like a wave, each positive comment affirming his vision, igniting a fire within him. He had become a vessel of hope, bringing people together who once felt isolated. As he collaborated closely with David, the journey unveiled its challenges, but each hurdle only solidified their partnership. Long meetings filled with brainstorming sessions turned into planning strategies, and through it all, David revealed the lessons he had learned over his own difficult path. And then the day of the official launch arrived, and Jake stood outside the venue, heart racing in anticipation. The atmosphere buzzed with the energy of potential. He could see people milling about, their conversations swirling like currents around him. He took a deep breath, stepping inside. The very room where he had felt crushed just months ago now pulsed with excitement. Jake could feel the weight of expectations, but this time it was different. He wasn't weighed down by fear, he was buoyed by hope. As he took the stage, he saw faces filled with anticipation. There were familiar people and strangers alike, individuals who had supported him, strangers whose lives would soon be transformed by his app. Standing before them, he felt powerful, standing on the precipice of a dream realized. Jake opened his mouth to speak, and the words flowed like a river. "This app is more than just technology, it's about building a community," he declared passionately. He wove tales of users who had found solace and understanding, reminding everyone that vulnerability is a strength. As he spoke, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Frowns softened into smiles, confusion melted into understanding. He could feel the connection heightening, hearts beating in sync. He spoke not just to sell an idea, but to ignite a change, a movement that transcended the app itself. When he finished, the applause erupted like thunder, washing over him like a cascade of love and support. In that moment, standing before a crowd moved by his story, he knew he had fulfilled a purpose beyond mere existence. After the formalities, people rushed towards him, eager to connect, share their experiences, and express gratitude. Amid the whirlwind of excitement, he spotted Sarah lingering on the edge of the crowd, arms crossed but her expression softer, contemplative. Jake approached her, a sense of resolution swelling within him. "Thank you for the chance to share my vision," he said, the sincerity evident in his voice. To his surprise, Sarah met his gaze with a small smile. "I misjudged you, Jake. You've proven that persistence pays off." In that moment, Jake felt a connection sparked, a shift from rejection to respect, witnessing how perceptions could change through understanding. The days turned into months, and the app flourished, helping countless individuals navigate their mental health journeys. Users shared their stories of triumph, each narrative reinforcing the mission Jake had set out to fulfill. He often found himself reflecting on that day at the conference. The rejection that had once felt like a crushing blow had turned into a catalyst for transformation. He had learned that setbacks can open doors you never knew existed. As he engaged with new users and converted skeptics into advocates, he embraced the realization that each of their stories mattered. Jake had created not just an app, but a community, a network of individuals intertwined through shared experiences, uplifting one another through the darkness. And on a balmy evening months later, as he stood in front of an audience sharing his journey, Jake felt surges of gratitude. By showing up, by being brave enough to face rejection head-on, he and every person involved had created ripples of change. "Sometimes our greatest successes lie hidden behind our fears," he declared, the truth rolling off his tongue. "It's about moving forward despite the odds." As the audience applauded, each clap resonated with a promise, a reminder that dreams can manifest even in the face of adversity. Jake knew deep down that he had created something powerful together with the help of David and a dash of his own relentless will. He had turned rejection into resilience, and with that, he had ignited a flame of hope that would continue to spread far beyond himself, illuminating the journey for countless others in their darkest moments. And in that continuation of hope, Jake understood fully the impact one handshake could make, not just for him, but for a world in desperate need of connection and understanding. Through courage and perseverance, he had transformed dreams into a reality, an affinity that would continue to evolve and inspire. In a bustling auditorium filled with the electric hum of ambition, Jake felt the weight of his dreams pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. He stood at the entrance of a prestigious tech conference, a place where innovators gathered to share ideas and inspire one another. Everywhere he looked, entrepreneurs were mingling, pitching their projects, and shaking hands with investors who could change their lives. The atmosphere was alive with optimism, but for Jake, it was also suffocating. He had spent countless nights honing his app, a user-friendly platform designed to connect those struggling with mental health issues to the resources and community support they desperately needed. But now, as he watched others confidently present their ideas, he felt a creeping doubt settle in. What if he didn't measure up? What if his dreams crumbled before him? Beside the registration desk, a woman named Sarah commanded the room. It was no secret that she held the power of approval or rejection in her hands. Many had spoken of her icy demeanor, her sharp gaze that could slice through weak arguments with a single glance. To be dismissed by her was a fate many feared. Jake took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, stepping forward, but the moment he approached, he hesitated. A flood of anxiety washed over him. With shaky hands, he fumbled for his notes. Sarah's voice rang out, cutting through his thoughts like a knife. "I'm Jake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes flicked to him and then back to her clipboard. His heart sank, disappointment coiling tightly in his chest. "But I really believe it can help people." She interrupted, not even looking at him anymore. The finality of her words struck him hard. He stepped back, feeling the ground shift beneath him. It was as if the world had shrunk, leaving him isolated. All the late nights and endless tweaking of his app felt futile. He stood there, grappling with a tidal wave of despair, when suddenly a ripple of excitement swept through the crowd. Someone exclaimed, and the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Heads turned, and a murmur of awe went through the audience. Jake's heartbeat quickened. There he was, David, the founder of the conference, a man renowned for his innovative ideas and his uncanny ability to spot talent. The crowd parted like the sea as David made his way through, exuding an aura of confidence. Jake's breath caught in his throat, a spark of hope igniting within him. If he could just get David's attention, everything could change. Without thinking, Jake moved deeper into the throng, determination pushing him forward. With each step, the chaos melted away, and all that mattered was reaching David. "This could be my shot," Jake thought, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He called out, his voice rising above the noise. The founder turned, his eyes locking onto Jake's. That moment felt suspended in time. David replied, his demeanor inviting. Jake felt a rush of relief, the floodgates of his thoughts opening. "I'm Jake." Before he could elaborate, Sarah, swift as lightning, stepped in between them. "David, we don't have time for this," she warned, her tone filled with authority. Jake's heart plummeted. The chance of a lifetime felt like it was slipping through his fingers, but David didn't flinch. "Let's hear him out," he said firmly, his eyes scanning Jake's face. Jake felt a jolt of hope surge through him. What would happen next? Here was a man willing to listen. "Just a few minutes," Sarah conceded, but her irritation was palpable. Jake breathed, heart racing with a mix of excitement and dread. "My app is designed to create connections between individuals who are struggling and the resources that can help them." He spoke with newfound confidence, feeling the tides begin to shift. David asked, leaning slightly forward. Jake seized the moment, letting his vision flow. "It utilizes AI to analyze user interactions, adapting recommendations to fit personal needs." He could see David's expression shift, interest sparking in his eyes, but Sarah wasn't done yet. "Even if this concept is intriguing, it lacks a proven track record, Jake. Without a prototype or substantial backing, it's too early to invest," she said, her voice dripping with skepticism. Jake felt the panic rising again, but David countered quickly. "That's why we're here, Sarah." In that heartbeat, everything felt as if it were on a precipice. The air around Jake seemed electric with possibility. "Let's arrange a meeting," David said, extending his hand. Time stood still as Jake reached out and shook David's hand. The warmth of that connection flooded through him, igniting a fire of hope and purpose. This could change everything. As he stepped back, he caught Sarah's gaze again. This time it lingered. There was no dismissiveness, just a hint of respect. Perhaps she was beginning to understand the fire beneath his ambition. Once he was out of earshot, Jake felt an overwhelming wave of exhilaration wash over him. Those moments of rejection melted away. He was no longer just a dreamer. He had become a man with a purpose, a vision, and an opportunity. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of activity. Jake dove headfirst into refining his app, driven by determination and the promise of collaboration. He reached out to potential users, gathering feedback and insights that shaped the future of his project. The early responses were overwhelmingly positive, each email a spark that fueled his ambition. Meanwhile, Jake remained in close contact with David, whose guidance carved out pathways that felt both thrilling and daunting. They met regularly, brainstorming strategies and identifying ways to position the app in the market. But hurdles weren't just professional, they were deeply personal. Jake fought against the creeping doubts that had plagued him since the beginning. David would sense this and say, "Every failure is just another step towards success. Don't let fear stop you." And so, with each collaboration, Jake began to assemble a team of designers, developers, and mental health professionals who shared his passion. They worked day and night, long hours spent in heated discussions, brainstorming sessions that felt like battles fought side by side. Then the day of the official launch approached. Excitement mingled with anxiety as Jake stood outside the venue, staring at the large banners promoting the app. This was the moment he had envisioned, a culmination of everything he had worked for. The sight made his pulse quicken, and he prayed that the world would resonate with his dream as deeply as he had. As he stepped inside, the buzz of anticipation surrounded him. The same room where mere months ago he had faced rejection now pulsed with energy and potential. Faces from all walks of life filled the space, eager to hear what he had created. Jake took a deep breath, stepping onto the stage. He could see the crowd investors, mental health advocates, and curious attendees all watching with eager anticipation. With a quick glance at David, standing in the front row nodding encouragingly, he began to speak. This app isn't just about technology. It embodies a mission of vision for a world where mental health struggles aren't faced alone. We are here to create an empowering community, he declared passionately, his voice resonating. He shared stories of users whose lives had been transformed, tales of individuals who had felt trapped, unable to reach out. As he painted the narrative, he saw heads nodding, eyes glistening with understanding and empathy. He wasn't just selling an idea, he was connecting on a deeper level, weaving a tapestry of shared experiences. Together, we can break the stigma that surrounds mental health. Together, we can foster understanding, empathy, and community, Jake proclaimed, his heart racing with each word. As he finished, the applause erupted like thunder, washing over him in waves. It was a sound unlike anything he had ever experienced, a powerful affirmation of his journey, of every struggle he had faced and every sleepless night spent refining his vision. Afterward, the crowd flooded toward him, eager to share their thoughts and experiences. He lost himself in conversations, each exchange validating the reasons he fought so hard. But then, amidst the buzz of excitement, he searched for Sarah. There she was, standing at the edge of the crowd, observing, her expression inscrutable. He made his way toward her, feeling both nervous and hopeful. "Thank you for pushing me," he said sincerely. "I appreciate the challenge you presented." Sarah's gaze softened. "You exceeded all expectations, Jake. I was wrong to underestimate you." The validation felt like a balm on his spirit, washing away lingering doubts. As they spoke, he could see her respect shift, a bridge formed over their previous interactions, a connection built through mutual understanding. But then, just as everything seemed to be aligning perfectly, a voice cut through the celebratory atmosphere, shattering the moment. An anxious investor called out, rushing toward them with a furrowed brow. The sudden urgency halted conversations around them. Jake's heartbeat accelerated, unease creeping back in. This wasn't how the day was supposed to end. David urged, stepping forward to grasp the situation. But before the investor could respond, the lights flickered, drawing attention. The unexpected dimming stirred a feeling of dread, a sensation of foreboding heavy enough to feel like a storm was brewing. Jake exchanged worried glances with David, both sensing that something was off. Dread curled in his stomach. In that moment, uncertainty loomed like a shadow. They hadn't just launched an app, they had embarked on a journey filled with risks and challenges, and it felt like the ground might shift beneath them.